Can Bluesky dethrone Twitter?
And how soon will we see EV trucks rolling down Australia's highways?
Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award-winning tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading tech journalists and commentators to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined, as usual, by a man who promises me that he has a supply chain tattoo somewhere on his body, but equally a man who has promised never to show it to me. Now, Mr. Adam Turner, you remember that promise, right? You're going to keep that promise, right?
Look, I swore I'd never tell, but I can tell you it's definitely downstream.
Too much information? Way too much information. We're also joined once again by Zach Kelly from Gizmodo Australia. Zach, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here. I don't want to see that either, Adam.
Well, I was going to say, Zach, if you were going to get an unusual tech-inspired tattoo, what would it be? And if you feel like saying, where would it be?
Oof. I would love to get probably somewhere on the arm, and it would be probably do you know Framework, the builder laptop company?
Yep.
I'd probably get their logo just because I really love the idea of tech modularity, you know?
Which is great until someone decides that maybe they need to upgrade your arm.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, you might be asking for trouble there.
I don't know. Maybe I want a cyborg arm one day.
Well, while Zach ponders the cost or value of a cyborg arm, we've got him here because this week we're talking social media and once again, pretenders to the Twitter throne of, hang on, I'm just going to check my notes. One Mr. Elon Musk. Sounds like a made-up name to me. Anyway, we'll be diving into the world, or possibly jumping into the sky of Bluesky a little later, as well as discussing everything EV, from trucks to range anxiety directly. But first, it's time for a rapid-fire bounce through this week's news headlines. And first up, a really serious topic, not a silly thing to start with. The Communications Alliance has put out new telco guidelines for domestic and family violence victims. So these are designed to allow telcos to develop their processes to help people who are victims of domestic and family violence. They're not new, but we thought we really should highlight them because it shows how that market, how that industry is evolving.
Is part of that dealing with spyware? Because I know that's a common thing of people who find themselves in this situation, something they need to look for.
Yes, so there's some indicative stuff there, and it's difficult because there's regulatory frameworks as well as obviously best practice and things that they really should try to do, and they have to sort of be broad because these are guidelines for telcos to follow. But yes, that question of kind of spyware and cyber stalking is definitely in there as part of that. Moving right along though, because that is a very kind of deep topic that probably deserves its own segment in a later show, perhaps. Google has added passkeys to Google accounts finally. Now, passkeys have been around for a bit, but they can be a bit of a confusing topic.
So what is a pass? I know what a passphrase is. It's like, my voice is my password, a long sentence or something. What's a pass key?
Well, now that we have that recording, Adam, I can now get into
I'm
all your
screwed.
voice-active
I'm
locks.
screwed.
So look, the really simple way to describe a passkey is it's kind of like two-factor authentication mashed in with a passkey as a crypto thing. So one side holds one side of each of the two pieces you need to unlock. But the basic idea here is that your phone or your laptop or some other tech device will form your part of that unlocking device more securely than a password would. Zach, how's your password hygiene? Are you going to need passkeys?
Password, right? I see there being nothing wrong with just making what you find so secure as it can be. I use my Google accounts for pretty much everything, so I care about my password hygiene for that a lot. Two-factor authentication has really been a godsend for just making sure nobody can get into your account. So this is nothing but good news in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not an absolutely bulletproof thing in and of itself, but no, security is.
Right,
And we should point out as well, this is not Google's inventing passkeys. This is not G passkeys or anything. This is actually an industry standard. Apple's got it in iOS. Microsoft's on board with it. There is a whole standard around this concept of passkeys. And listeners, I think you're going to hit an awful lot more passkey encouragement in the months and years to come. Speaking of things in the months and years to come, bad news if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber feeling the economic pinch. Zach, what has Amazon done this week that's going to make Australians cranky?
Amazon is raising its price by about $3. It's going up from $6.99 to $9.99 in Australia, and it's following on a trend from the streaming services. Netflix raised its prices, Disney raised its prices, Binge didn't raise its prices, but it introduced an ads tier. So I feel like we're going to see a price rise there at some point. But it's it's interesting for Amazon because Amazon offers so much more than just a streaming service. They offer their delivery service, Prime, right? And they offer a bunch of inclusions, like they offer Twitch.tv inclusions. They offer Amazon Music and Audible, stuff like that. And yet the service is still priced below many of its competitors.
Yeah, they're basically throwing a video for free.
Yeah, it's all just like it's honestly, it's not a terrible deal still.
No, it's not as compelling a deal as it used to be. Although it's not actually rolling in. I think if you're not a subscriber, it's something like off the top of my head, it's like March, May the 24th. What month are we even in? May the 24th. If you're a new subscriber, and existing subscribers have got till late June, I think, before
Right,
that kicks
yeah.
in on your next refresh. So, quick tip there: if you are a subscriber and it's about to go, maybe jump onto their yearly sub, which is like $59 before
Which
it
will then
becomes
go up to
79.
79. Yeah.
Yeah, before it becomes $79. Um, Moving right along from that, there's a new smartphone, and Adam, I love a smartphone, but I'm sometimes terrible with smartphones in terms of what happens to them.
You are known for
Nokia's
it. You are known
Nokia's
for it.
new XR21 is a phone that I think I'm going to have trouble breaking.
Hand it to Gus.
Now that's a plan. That's a good plan. Gus is even more brutal to tech than I am. Zach, why might I struggle to get the XR21 to stop working?
Oh, well, I mean, I could think of a few creative ways to make any tech stop working, but I mean, this thing, if you put it through, like, they're marketing this thing on being extra durable. So it's certainly not going to be as easy to break as your standard iPhone or your standard Google Pixel. I think it's able to withstand like being an hour under 1.5 meters of water, and that's pretty impressive. That goes well beyond an IP rating, right?
Well, no,
But
it has an IP rating.
well,
It
I'm
is IP. It is
Goes up to
IP
11.
six. It is IP 69K, which
oh,
is basically
whoa.
the thing that they use for like washing truck tires. And I'm not kidding. This is what I think the specification is 100 bar water pressure at 80 degrees Celsius. This thing is meant to be able to survive. That's a particularly brutally strong phone. Although the trade-off for this particular $799 phone is almost everything else on it is below what you could get out of an $800 phone.
Yeah, it specs wise, it doesn't appear to be that impressive, but also too, it's not terrible. Like
Mm.
the when you get a phone like it'd probably be priced around 600 if it didn't have that durability standard to it, but that durability factor to it. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a terrible phone at all. Frankly, it's going to be perfectly usable.
Well, it's going to be perfectly usable after you've run over it with your truck, basically.
Oh, I hope I get to try that.
So another week, another contender out there trying to knock Twitter off its iron throne. Zach, what's Bluesky and why should people care?
So, Bluesky is the latest in a long run of Twitter alternatives. It follows on from Co-host and Hive Social and a bunch of others that people swore were going to be the Twitter replacement, but nobody talks about anymore. Bluesky might actually be a little bit different, in my opinion. Like, it's come from Jack Dorsey, and it actually originally started as a Twitter spinout. And the difference is that
As opposed to the spin out that Twitter's having at the moment.
as opposed to the spin out that Twitter's having at the moment, it's strange that Dorsey kind of just took the money, left, and has just gone and made the same thing again. Except this time around, how Bluesky is different from Twitter is that it has this focus on decentralization. And that word kind of loses its meaning if we talk about cryptocurrency and stuff like that. But in the context of Blue Sky, it's about it's about the usernames, really. The usernames on Blue Sky kind of look like web URLs. It's not simply, for example, my Twitter at Zachariah K. It's not simply that. If I was on Blue Sky, it'd look more like a web domain. It'd have to be something like at Zachariah K dot bluesky.com, something like that.
Rolls off the tongue.
But
Really rolls off the tongue.
am I right in thinking that decentralization is, and that's sort of what Mastodon's built around as well? It's the idea that there's no one central, all powerful ruler who can make crazy decrees.
Right, that's right. And it's kind
Not
of
looking at anyone in particular.
yeah, nobody at all. Nobody who just spent $44 billion on a bird app. But no, it's kind of a farcical idea considering that it's one company building this app there, right?
It's an interesting play, especially given Mastodon is sort of already there. But I'll be honest, because Blue Sky has been, it's not new this week. It's been around for a little bit.
It's been around for a small beta.
Yeah. I have not yet done the dive into Blue Sky because I think I'm now more happily kind of locked into mostly Mastodon world, as I think the listeners will know. Am I really missing out on that much?
It's very much just like a very stripped down Twitter client. I got my invite, surprisingly enough, this morning off an old friend. Such an old friend that I actually had to check it was really her, not a scammer. But it just feels like a bare bones Twitter at this point. The layout's the same, even the color scheme is the same. But that makes more sense when you understand that it sort of started off as a Skunkworks project from Twitter. Where it goes from there remains to be seen.
I think that's kind of going to be the telling point with Blue Sky, right? And this is kind of what's making it different from all of these other supposed Twitter killers, right? The difference that Blue Sky is having is that it's kind of promising the exact same thing as Twitter. And that's why a lot of high profile people, like, all the like shit posters and a lot of like news organizations and celebrities are actually moving over to Blue Sky, as long as they've got invites. Because it's basically the same thing. You know, they don't have to completely change their deal for a much less known app.
All this talk of invites is giving me Google Wave flashbacks.
I was actually thinking about that too.
Well, if any of you, if you guys have an invite, send it my way.
For Google Wave, yeah, I'm sure I got one lying around somewhere. So what can it do, apart from not being bought by Elon Musk, what can Blue Sky do to avoid Twitter's mistakes?
Oh, that's a really, really tough question because, obviously Twitter wasn't perfect to begin with. It got content moderation a lot better than, current Twitter back when it was owned by the old Twitter.
Back when it had content moderation, let's be honest.
Well, it has content moderation now. It's just that it's exceptionally lax. Then I guess Blue Sky, I'm not sure what it would do to sort of like avoid the mistakes of the past. Twitter kind of got really something that comes up when they're reporting about new Twitter is like reflections on how the old Twitter operated and how it got so big in such a short amount of time to the point where just new projects were so slow to roll out and complete. I'm not sure how Blue Sky could be any different or set itself up to be any different. But, with Jack Dorsey at the helm and knowing what worked the last time, he's probably got a pretty good idea of what to avoid this time.
I would think content moderation and clear-cut policies would be a big thing because that is something that a lot of the social media networks sort of figured out on the fly, done badly, fixed, maybe screwed up again. So you would really, that should be their starting point. That should be their baseline of understanding the importance of moderation and the difference that it makes into building a healthy community as opposed to a dumpster fire.
Mm. One of the things that I hope Blue Sky doesn't have any trouble with, and it worries me that it might, is just how user friendly it might be with this focus on decentralization. It's been one of the biggest problems with Mastodon. Onboarding is extremely difficult because it's kind of difficult for the average social media user to understand anything that's going on that website. It's not until you've been there for a while that you really get anything.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Mastodon's actually come out and said they're going to make some moves to make it a little bit easier to onboard. I think they're making with Mastodon.social as the kind of default that it will push you towards if it feels like it has to while you're while you're learning the ropes. But the comparison, I think, is an interesting one as well from a cultural standpoint. Part of the reason that I'm doing most of my genuinely social stuff, I'm still on Twitter for promotional purposes, but part of the reason that I'm doing most of my genuinely social stuff on Mastodon is that it's definitely developed a culture. There's definitely a certain vibe, if you will, to Mastodon. And I'm wondering if Blue Sky's got enough of that critical mass to start seeing, is it internet snarky? Is it progressive or conservative? Is it leaning any particular way?
In From where I can see, I use Twitter all the time. It's definitely my number one used social media thing because I use it to relax. Relax. Heavy quotations. I use it to look at memes. I look it to catch
You
up on
need
the
help.
news. I need help. Yes, I've heard that before. But I think one of the indicators of Blue Sky, I don't think it needs to establish this particular niche. I think what people want it to be is just to establish what Twitter had. And I think what a lot of people are taking and running with in that vein is an account called Drill. And Drill is one of the most well known, I guess, shit posters on Twitter. And this is the first Twitter like alternative that he's gone and made an account for. So I think that's that and a lot of similar accounts to Drill, so celebrities and other prolific posters, are going to be the golden goose, the thing that really convinces people to switch over.
Do you think that's because Blue Sky's been smart behind the scenes and who it's handed out the invites to and made sort of these approaches, or do you think it's been a bit more organic than that?
I think the invites are definitely helping. It's definitely helping them to take things a lot slower at the moment and
Mm.
handle invites how they're doing it, as opposed to just having the app open to everyone and everybody gets confused at the same time.
It builds hype too, though. The
Yeah,
same
build.
way with the first Gmail invites, the first Google Wave invites,
Are
anything that
we?
relies on
Yeah,
Yeah,
invites builds hype.
I was going to say, are we building hype via scarcity?
Yes.
And do
yeah.
we have a time frame on when they're going to say, "All right, stacks on, everyone in"?
I haven't heard one so far.
So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens with Blue Sky then. Is it another Blue Sky dream or is it in fact the Twitter killer? What do our listeners think? Let us know. Give us some feedback. Send us feedback via whatever social media platform that you, I, Adam, or Zach happen to be on.
Yeah, Google Plus.
Oh, maybe not that one. So Zach is also here because Zach is the man at Gizmodo, or the person, I should say, when it comes to EVs. And Zach, usually when we talk about EVs, people kind of think, oh, well, we are talking about Teslas, we're talking about Polestars, we're talking about small consumer vehicles. This week, the focus in Australia has somewhat shifted towards EV trucks. Tell me about why EV trucks might be important.
Yeah, so today a startup called Adiona Tech released a study on Australia's truck fleets and last mile delivery fleets, and is basically putting forward the argument that prioritizing Australia's trucks and electrifying Australia's trucks could have a greater impact on the transport sector's CO2 emissions than encouraging like household EV uptake.
The numbers are pretty compelling, aren't they? Like, what is it? They're claiming something like one truck is the same as 56 household purchasing an electric car.
Ten trucks.
10
This is
trucks. Sorry, I had my
yeah,
numbers slightly out of whack there.
yeah. Well, individually, one of the jarring numbers that stuck out to me was large trucks produce 111 tons of CO2 per year, while small trucks produce 16.2 CO2 tons of CO2 emissions per year, while individual cars produce 2.84 tons. That is incredibly jarring.
So, how practical is it, though, to turn a truck into an EV? That's the big question, isn't it?
It's the big question, right? I think there's been a lot of hype around hydrogen in particular for big fleet vehicles like that because you can refuel the hydrogen vehicles faster and more efficiently. You can store hydrogen easier, whereas electric trucks, obviously it's a lot slower to charge. You don't have to worry about having to create hydrogen for the vehicle, but or store hydrogen for the vehicle. But
The hydrogen just happens naturally around the vehicle. These hydrogen pumps are just going to appear on my street corner.
No. It just becomes this like, wasting electricity when we could just be doing battery electric things. But it kind of makes sense for fleet vehicles to go hydrogen.
Do you think that we'll see a mix? Like there's at the moment with the fuels we have, there's not one solution for everything. Some things run on diesel, some things run on, normal petrol, whatever. Do you think that there's room for hydrogen trucks and electric trucks? And where would you put the split?
I think there's definitely room for hybrid solutions with this kind of thing. And I think when it comes to fleet vehicles, I think the hybrid solution is going to be for those longer hauls where range is everything. Hydrogen is kind of probably going to be more important.
Hmm.
Probably going to be the preference. For last mile delivery, so think Ozpost depot to your doorstep, for example. That's probably going to be something that an electric vehicle can accommodate for.
Yeah. I've also written a bit about this myself recently, and there's been a lot of work done on hydrogen hybrid engines and the ability to take combustion engines and upgrade them to run on hydrogen, which means you don't need to redesign the whole vehicle and redesign the whole powertrain. But even to take existing diesel engines and modify them so they can run on diesel or hydrogen, which means you can run on hydrogen when you've got it and diesel when you don't, which makes it easier for trucking fleets to go, okay, well, we can dip our toe into hydrogen without worrying about range anxiety and where we're going to fuel up. And it's that kind of thing that will help lift all boats.
Well, I'm curious there, Adam, and you may or may not know the answer to this kind of question without notice, because obviously you get that kind of hybrid thing in in existing passenger vehicles now,
Mm.
but it's often seen as the kind of worst of both worlds because they typically have very limited EV range, and then you've got the complexity of a combustion engine. Is this just adding complexity and things that are going to break down on my delivery truck when it's halfway
Well,
across the Nullarbor?
like I was saying, it's not in the long term. Perhaps trucks that run on hydrogen fuel cells make more sense than these hybrid trucks. But then you've got that gap, the same we do with electric vehicles, the chicken and egg of, well, where are my fueling stations and stuff. So these hybrid engines are kind of like a stepping stone to help build up the infrastructure, so it then becomes easier to bring in pure hydrogen or pure electric because you've already built up the infrastructure for these hybrid things that when they couldn't get to a fueling station could still run on their
No,
own
no,
fuel.
I get that. I'm more just thinking on an individual vehicle basis. Are there more points of failure because they've
Um,
got to support both?
yeah, well, when you're upgrading a combustion engine and you're running it on both, it's still the same combustion engine. It's slightly different, but it's not like you put two engines in the vehicle. And that's maybe the thing with your hybrid vehicles at the moment that run on like your hybrid consumer vehicles. If they've got an electric engine and a combustion engine, I mean, then you've made yourself a lot more extra work. But if you've got a vehicle that just has the one combustion engine in it, then it's still the old mechanic can still work on it the old ways, and it's not as difficult a learning curve, and you're not doubling your maintenance.
I think the underscoring point of all of this is there's got to be room for flexibility.
Mm,
There's got to
Mm.
be room for hydrogen and electricity to accommodate for different people and different solutions. One of the things that I keep coming back to when talking about electric vehicles is off-roading, like four-wheel drives. There's not a lot of EV solutions that I can think of right now that can accommodate for like, extreme off-road campers or like tradies that need to go into like extreme off-road areas. Like there's not many like your Toyota Land Cruiser, for example. There's not many EV alternatives to that, especially not ones with the same range. And
I
I
wasn't
think,
I
I'm
yep.
wasn't
getting
aware
there
that,
though.
that hydrogen was massively transportable if you ran out in the middle of your four wheel drive. Though I had this inkling in my head that it was just a little bit explosive.
Not to cheerlead for Toyota for a second, but like I definitely think there's got to be that room for flexibility depending
Sure,
on the
sure.
circumstance.
But it also makes sense to focus on the areas where you're going to make the most difference. There's not, relatively speaking, there's not that many people, not that many vehicles in those circumstances. And if they're the last vehicles to
Mm.
move off diesel or whatever, so be it.
Yeah, of
If
course.
everybody else is already off fossil fuels, it doesn't matter if they take a bit longer.
Yeah, right. Every little bit counts. Hey.
Mm.
Well, that just about wraps up this week's episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Zach for joining us this week.
No worries. Happy to be here as always.
And now it's time, as it usually is, for the Vertical Hold 3 questions of doom. I'll ask them in rapid fire order. You can answer them any way you like, although answers that make sense are preferred. Where can people find your work online? Where can they find you on social media? And out of all the stories you've written over the years, what's your most favorite?
Yeah, okay. So you can find my work on Gizmodo Australia at gizmodoaustralia.com.au. You can find me on Twitter at Zachariah K _. And my favorite story that I've written is probably my interview with Mitsubishi Australia's CEO, where he talked to me about um, why the company isn't bringing electric vehicles to the country just yet.
That sounds like a very sad story, but I'm sure you have your reasons.
It was a pleasure to write.
Those are always good. Those are always good. And speaking of good, if you want to catch up with us, you can catch us online at Vertical Hold AU on Twitter, on Instagram, via the Vertical Hold Facebook page, or on the web at verticalhold.com.au.
And thanks as always for listening, no matter how you found us. Don't forget, drop us a line, let us know what you think about what we spoke about today and maybe what we could do better in the future.